2022 is the first year of the 18-inch Pirelli Formula 1 tires, and the tire manufacturer's already discussing changes for 2023. But why? If you've not heard too much about this yet, it's not surprising considering most of the technical discussion that we've had this year has centered entirely around porpoising. But there's actually some really interesting stuff going on with the 18-inch tires, how we ended up in this situation, and what Pirelli can do to improve this. So far this year, we've heard that Max Verstappen has been one of the most vocal regarding the car balance issues which he's having, which appears to be related to the tire and not the car. But before we talk about the tires and their issues, we need to discuss a few things first. We always hear the engineers and drivers talking about the balance, but what exactly do we mean by car balance? In the most simple terms, car balance describes the way the car reacts to a driver's steering inputs. The general terms we use to describe this are understeer and oversteer. Oversteer and understeer simply relate how much the driver's steering inputs into the car versus how quickly the car turns or rotates. An understeer car tends to turn less than the driver would like and would tend to miss a corner apex that they were aiming for. When the car is understeering, adding more steering does not help rotate the car more, as the front tires have already saturated, or the rear tires are simply too strong in this condition. On the other hand, oversteer car rotates more than the driver would like. This could manifest itself as a snap, requiring a correction, or even potentially causing a spin. The other situation is this car is just a very nervous car that the driver can never push on the way into the corner for fear of what might happen. Understeer and oversteer can be present everywhere through low speed, medium speed, and high speed corners, or it could be isolated to a specific corner of the track or even the phase of a corner. Let me give you an example of that. The car could be oversteer as the driver exits the corner and applies the throttle, causing the car to rotate on itself. Or the car could be very understeer on turn-in, or the phase where the driver's bleeding off of the brakes and starting to apply the steering lock. Now, there are so many factors which determine what the car's actual balance is. This includes all the car setup parameters, the track conditions, and the tires. I could spend hours talking about all that, but I'm gonna save all the juicy car balance bits for another video in the future. So that's probably an excellent reason why you should subscribe to the channel now if you haven't already. So what's the actual problem with the 2022 tires? From the comments that we've heard from the drivers, it looks like there's an issue with the front tires in terms of combined braking and cornering grip into the low speed corners. This means as the driver is rolling off the brake pedal and starting to add steering into the front tires, there's just not enough grip available to balance out how strong the rear tires are here. Now, you might say, can't you just change the car setup to help with the low speed balance? Yes, it is possible, but it's not for free. Isolating the entry or apex of low-speed corners can be very difficult with the setup parameters that engineers have to play with on a Formula 1 car. For now, it seems like the best compromise that the engineers have found is to accept that the balance on entry to low-speed corners may be just a little bit understeering. I'll go out on a limb and say if they try to resolve this issue that they've got with the setup tools in hand, this may result in a very snappy car on low-speed exit, which could be more detrimental for lap time and tire wear than just dealing with the understeer itself. Based on the feedback that Pirelli have received, they appear to agree that the front tires are a relatively weak point and want to improve upon this. But this raises an interesting question. How do we end up with these balance issues on the tires in the first place? Now, this is an entirely new set of aerodynamic regulations and the first year of 18-inch tires in Formula 1. Before the 2022 ground effect cars were even built, the FIA allowed teams to produce a mule car based on an older specification of car in order to allow the teams to test the 18-inch tires at specific tire tests last year. Knowing that the new cars would have vastly different aerodynamic characteristics, the teams used their wind tunnel and simulation tools to design new floors and wings for these mule cars in order to achieve an aero characteristic closer to what the designers expected the 2022 cars to produce. So, one interpretation is that the mule cars had a much different balance characteristic to those of the 2022 cars that we've got this season, which resulted in Pirelli targeting a slightly weaker front tire in low speed. Another interpretation of this is that the tires are just a very difficult topic, and this is the best that Pirelli could do so far with the testing they had available on the mule cars. So let's try to understand exactly what we mean by saying the front tire is too weak. Now, I'm not going to dig into how the setup and track conditions influence the car balance, but in order to explain the situation with the front tires, we do have to dig a little bit deeper into how tires generate grip. The primary way in which a tire generates grip is, well, by slipping, sort of. You might have heard the term slip angle. In short, this is the angle between the heading of the car and the pointing angle of the tire. In reality, most of the time, the tire contact patch is gripping the ground and part of the contact patch is sliding. But for the sake of this discussion, we're just going to take a step back and look at the slip angle as a whole. So what does slip angle have to do with car balance? Let's look at it this way. When the driver turns the wheel of the car, the front tires generate a slip angle and this produces a lateral force, which is then balanced out by the rear of the car, assuming another slip angle and generating a balancing force. So when we talk about the balance of the car, the driver controls the front tires and then the rear axle balances out the inputs. Again, everything comes back to a balance of front to rear. Now, the relationship of tire grip and slip angle might look something like this. They will be slightly different for the front and rear tires, but for now we can talk about this in terms of tires in general. Now, by looking at this chart, you can see from no slip angle the tire generates no lateral force. Then, as the tire begins to slip, it starts to generate force in a linear fashion. We tend to refer to this segment as the cornering stiffness of the tire, and this plays a big factor in how sharp the car is on initial turn-in. As the tire begins to slip even more, you start to see the grip starting to fall away slightly. Usually this part of the tire curve is being used as the driver bleeds off the brakes and starts to rotate the car into the corner. Ultimately, we end up with a peak of grip at a certain slip angle. This will be the somewhat steady state part of the grip curve that the driver is using at the apex of the corner. Then, if the driver tends to go over this peak, the tire force saturates and starts to drop away. There are so many caveats to this. For example, the shape of this curve changes as a function of vertical force, camber, how much braking, how much cornering, etc. But in general, the description above is good enough to help explain what the problem actually looks like from a tire point of view. Now we need to discuss what can be done to resolve this balance issue. What Pirelli will likely do is make the front tire quite a bit stiffer or have a stronger peak in low speed when the tire is lightly loaded. So in terms of the hypothetical tire curve that we looked at before, this region of the tire is likely what they're trying to address. By increasing the grip in this region, it should help the drivers to get more rotation done earlier in the entry to low speed corners before the tire starts to saturate at the peak. But whenever you change one physical aspect of the tire construction, it tends to change the tire everywhere else as well. The good news is that any track testing and development of the 2023 tires will have to be done on the 2022 cars. Not only will this give Pirelli confidence that the car they're testing against will be a good representation of what next year's car is likely to be, it will also give them an excellent opportunity to test multiple constructions of tires to determine which combination of construction changes and car setup changes can help optimize this new front tire construction. Now, I know we didn't go into too much detail about any single aspect of tires or car balance, but that just means I'm going to have plenty more videos to make on this in the future. Now, if you want to talk any more about this, I will be live on Twitch this weekend at twitch.tv/break. We'll be doing a qualifying watch along and a race watch along. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys there. If you've enjoyed this type of content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out some of these videos that I've left here for you. Enjoy Silverstone, and I'll see you next time.